Hello, I'm Jack and I'm a health and safety consultant with iSafe Health, Safety and Quality Services, and today we're going to be talking about the HSE. Who are the HSE? What's their purpose? What can they do if you get on the wrong side of them? And most importantly, how can you prevent getting on the wrong side of it? I'm sure nobody watching this video has ever broken the law in any way, but if you've ever gone over the speed limit, partook in a little underage drinking, or watched a movie that's been filmed by a shady guy in the back of the cinema, then you're the problem and you need to hand yourself over to the police immediately. Anyway, the vast majority of us are deterred from committing crimes by the police, and the knowledge that if we're caught committing a crime, a case will be built against us and we may ultimately be prosecuted for that crime. However, when it comes to health and safety law, it's not the police who are responsible for monitoring, investigating and prosecuting people who commit crimes, it's the HSE. But unlike the police, the HSE can enter your place of business without a warrant and talk to your workforce, take photographs, samples and measurements, and generally look for any breaches of health and safety legislation. It is noteworthy that the HSE do not need cause to visit your business and may simply complete a spot check. However, it's always more likely that you'll receive a visit if the HSE is running an initiative following something like a change in legislation, or if you've had a major accident within your business that's been reported to them under RIDDLE. If the HSE do pay you a visit, they will inspect your workplace to ensure that you are meeting all the requirements of health and safety law. If they do not find any breaches of health and safety legislation, then happy days, there'll be no further action. If the HSE officer spots something relatively minor, they may give you verbal or written advice, or in more serious cases, a formal caution. However, if they find any breaches of health and safety law, they may decide to raise an improvement notice against your company. This means that you have to correct the breach within a given timescale. Where more serious breaches of legislation are identified by the HSE officer, they may decide to raise a prohibition notice against your company. Prohibition notices are usually raised in cases where the breach is likely to cause a significant injury to somebody in your workforce. If you receive a prohibition notice, you must cease work in that area until you have put corrective action measures in place. If your organisation is issued with either an improvement or a prohibition notice, then the meter starts running and you'll start to be charged something called fee for intervention, or FFI. FFI is a charge that the HSE has in place to cover the time taken to inspect your workplace, identify the hazards and breaches and provide advice on corrective actions. At the time of recording this, fee for intervention is charged at £163 per hour. And if all that doesn't sound bad enough, it gets worse, because if the breach is serious enough, the HSE may decide to prosecute your organisation. At this point, they'll start building a case with a view to taking it to a criminal court. And what's worse is you'll be paying for it through the fee for intervention scheme. So all the time that they spend investigating, collecting evidence, you'll be being charged that fee for intervention. Ultimately, if the HSE are successful in getting a prosecution against your company, you'll receive a fine, or in really serious cases, directors may receive custodial sentences. So, what can you do to stop this happening to your business? Hang on, I've got this written down somewhere. Oh, here it is. Don't break the law. Although it's not quite as simple as that, because not breaking health and safety laws not quite as obvious as not breaking the law in everyday life. Day to day, we all know that if we nick something, that's illegal and will be punished if we get caught. However, when it comes to health and safety law, many of us just aren't aware of the requirements to such an extent, and are therefore oblivious as to whether we're meeting them or not. Furthermore, health and safety law changes regularly, and if we don't keep up to date with the latest changes and the latest requirements, how can we be sure that we're going to be meeting those regulations going forward? A good example of this is that prior to February 2019, you were okay to weld mild steel indoors with no local exhaust ventilation or respiratory protection. However, in February 2019, the HSE published guidance which said that it was now mandatory that you needed to wear some sort of respiratory protection and have some sort of local exhaust ventilation. These changes to the rules and what's mandatory and what's not aren't always publicised very well, and they can catch a lot of companies out when the HSE come knocking. How do we keep track of this legislation and all the changes that happen? Well, in my opinion, the most effective and simplest way of doing this is by producing a legal register. Now, this isn't as difficult as it sounds. All you need to do is open an Excel document. In the first column, put the main pieces of legislation that apply to you, all the pieces of legislation that apply to you. So the Health and Safety at Work Act, the Management Reg, COSH, Remember, not all pieces of health and safety legislation apply to every business. In the next column, write down the specific sections of each piece of legislation that apply to your business. Again, not every section of every piece of legislation applies to every business, so pick out the ones that apply to you. And then in a final column, write down how you comply with that legislation and make an assessment of, are you complying with that or are you not complying with that? And then you're done. You've got a legal register and you update that as there are changes in legislation. So how do you find out if there has been a change in health and safety legislation? Well, there are various ways. There are subscription services that you can subscribe to get regular updates on legislation, or you can use the HSE website. They give regular updates as well they should. And you can even subscribe to their bulletins, so you get an email each time there's a change in legislation. Or you could subscribe to this channel and I could tell you on a weekly basis all the changes. Oosh! Smooth as the bonnet of a Porsche. However, the most effective way of making sure that you're aware of all your requirements under health and safety law is making sure that you have access to a competent source of health and safety advice. Now, that could be somebody within your business, it could be an employed health and safety manager, health and safety officer, or it could be somebody external like myself or a member of the team at iSafe. And if you are interested in iSafe becoming your competent source of health and safety advice, click the link in the description below and we'll happily help you ensure those pesky HSE rapscallions don't find any breaches on your side. There's also a link in the description to the accompanying blog article about the HSE, so if you want to learn more about this, please click through onto that. This video is focused very much on the negative side of the HSE and what happens if you don't fall in line with the rules and requirements of health and safety law. But the HSE are there for a good reason. They're here to keep us in line and make sure that we meet those requirements. They also do a lot of research on hazards, and I mentioned earlier about the welding fumes. That's a great example of where the HSE have identified a serious problem which is causing liver and kidney cancer in people all over the country who work in fabrication, and they've changed the law to protect future generations, so it's not all bad. What's your experience been like with the HSE? Has it been overwhelmingly negative? Have you been subject to the dreaded fee for intervention or worse? Or have you had some good experiences with the HSE? Have they come onto site and been genuinely helpful and helped you solve some problems that you didn't know you had? Leave a comment below. Also, don't forget to subscribe. We're doing health and safety videos every week, making sure that we keep you up to date with all the legislation as we've talked about in this video, as well as a number of other health and safety issues, matters that you might need to be aware of. So make sure that you don't miss any of them by subscribing. In the meantime, thanks for watching and stay safe out there.